Okay, hello. Today we're looking at geargenerator.com, which is a really cool website that allows us to design gears and to see how they work and interact with each other. This website right here, just go to geargenerator.com and this pops up. This is our default screen. Just kind of gives you 4 gears set up. They're already moving and they're kind of cool. A couple different types of gears that we see here. We see just the normal kinds. We're used to seeing these with the teeth on the external side. So of course these little things coming out are called the teeth of the gear, and you can see how they interlocked with each other and interact with each other. So one gear pushes the other gears, and the one gear that is pushing, doing all the work, is called the driver gear or the drive gear. And so that would be this gear right here. I know we can't really tell just by looking at them, but we're going to find out how you can know which one is the drive gear. Anyway, the idea is one gear is doing the work. Like this would be the gear that's hooked up to a machine, or maybe the gear that's hooked up to the pedals on a bicycle, and those pedals are doing the work and pushing the other gears. So the teeth interlock, they push the other gears, and you can see how they interact. This gear right here, this large gear, is called an internal gear. So the teeth are on the inside of this one, and it's kind of just a neat different little setup right here where they interact from the internal or the inside of the gears. Well, all of the information about these gears are on the left side, and I'm going to go through those with you and show you how you can create your own gear set and examine those. Also, before we start, I want to take a look at this and just kind of acknowledge that it says check out Gear Generator 2 beta. We are going to do that, so give us time. We'll go over that and I'll show you some of the cool things in there. But let's just get started with this. First of all, let's figure out how do we select these gears. You'll notice I can click on these gears and select them. They'll see that they're highlighted when I click on them. Sometimes it's hard to because they overlap, and there we go. Sometimes we're getting it. There we are. So anyway, one way you can definitely select them is come over here. We see the gears listed along the side, starting with gear number 0. That is called the parent gear. That's our drive gear or driver gear. So sometimes we call it the parent. The parent is the one driving the other one. So gear number 0 is the drive gear, and it is parent to gear number 2 right here. And we can select them just by clicking, gear number 1. We can select them right along the side here, just like this. We see them highlight, and we're going to take a look at why we would need to do that. But gear number 0 is the parent to gear number 1, and gear number 1 is the parent to gear number 2, and so forth. Gear number 2 is driving gear number 3, so that's the parent of gear number 3. We see that these are rotating right up here with animation. We can change the speed of these. We can put in 10 and then go a little bit faster here. We could put in 50 and there we go. Now it's going. Yes, you can go to 100. And they're really moving fast. But it's hard to see them and how they really work. So it's better to examine these when they're moving a little bit slower, like at 10 right here. We can go ahead and hit stop. We can reset these. We could freeze them in mid-gear. We can add new gears and remove these. So let's remove these gears. We're going to remove number 3. Here's number 2 right here. Now we can see number 2 highlighted. Remove that one. We see number 1 highlighted. Remove that. That way we don't have a blank screen. As we come down here, we're going to see different properties about how they're connected together. We're going to see different properties about the gear that we've selected. And then we see download. This is for people who are going to maybe download it to a CAD file or some other image where they can cut it out of metal and actually create this, a physical product. The scale right here would allow us to scale down to make it a little bit smaller. We can make it larger. You know, we could scale it to 70 if we want to, and give it a certain size so that we can kind of zoom in a little bit. The grid, we can get rid of the grid if we'd like to. We can also, there's these little circles right here that show the guides. We don't need those. We can uncheck that. And also the gear label. These are the words and the information written on the gear. If you'd like to, you can clear those out. Sometimes I like to just keep them on there just to be able to look at that. The backgrounds can change. We can have a light background like this or a dark background like this. And the blue one, I'm just kind of used to that one. I'm going to go with that and keep that on there. Also, I kind of want to move this gear here. I'm used to like clicking and dragging, and that does not work here. So no clicking and dragging. What we can do though is we can change the X and the Y position. So I've unclicked auto position here, and now I can see X position, Y position, and I can, just like the X axis, I can move it along the X axis, I can move it along the Y axis, and position it somewhere better on my screen. So moving the X and Y positioning will position it on your screen. Now we can add new gears, or we can also just change the characteristics of this gear that we're looking at. Let's change some characteristics first, and then we'll start adding new gears. So we want to look at this area called gear properties, and we can change how the gear looks by gear properties. First of all, one of the most important things is the number of teeth involved. So when we look at this, we have 8 teeth sticking out, and we can increase this number one at a time, and we'll see as we add teeth to it, it gets bigger and bigger because it needs more space, obviously. So let's go up to 20. How about that? This is a gear with 20 teeth, and that's about it. I think we've looked at these things down here already. So let's create some new gears to attach to this. This is gear 0, so of course we could just hit add new right along here, and it will attach to that parent gear. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit, so I'm going to change our scale and take a look at where we want to place this gear. So you can see that it's highlighted. This is gear number 1. And we can look at the gear connection properties that say the parent gear is parent 0. That means it's attached to and being driven by this gear 0 right here. Now the angle connection right here, this will, if we hit plus or minus, you can see that it just determines its location along the parent angle. So 0 would be a horizontal along the x-axis like this. 0, it's a degree, so 0 degrees. And as we move up, then we of course go around there. Axle connection just means it's going to be attached along the center of the gear, so that when we have an axle connection and we run it, they run together. This is kind of like what a bicycle looks like when we have a number of gears on one of the axles. So let's take the axle connection off. So that's how you can kind of move around that gear. Of course, we can now change the number of teeth that are involved in it. Here's 10 teeth. And now let's take a look at what that looks like. So there's our gears with two gears. And of course, if we want to add more gears, we would just hit add new right here. So I'm going to select this gear right here. I want to add a gear to this to connect it to gear number 1. This is gear number 2 now. Now it's connected to gear number 1. We, of course, can change all of its properties. We can change the number of teeth on it. There's a monstrous one with 400 teeth. I did not mean to do that. Okay, 40. That's a big one right there. Let's scale it down. Let's see what this looks like here. If we wanted to change, of course, any of its connections, we could change its axle connection by rotating it around its parent gear, and even we can continue. Let's select our gear number 1, and we can move the whole thing around its parent gear too. So you can play around and have a lot of fun with these gears and see the different aspects and how they relate to each other. Okay, let's talk about the ratios. First of all, we do see ratios up here. So for each gear, it gives you a ratio, and it's comparing it to the drive gear right here. So how many teeth compared to the drive gear? Now, if we start off with the parent gear and compare it to the parent gear, which is itself, it's a 1-to-1 ratio, obviously. So we can really just need to look at the other gears. Gear number 1, its ratio, we would count the number of teeth, compare it to the number of teeth on the parent gear, and we see that it's a ratio of 1-to-2. That's because this is 10 teeth, and this has 20 teeth. So 10 to 20 is a ratio of 1-to-2. This has 40 teeth on it. So this is gear number 2, 40 teeth compared to 20 teeth. We're comparing it to the parent gear. So it is a 2-to-1 ratio, and we see that written right along here as well. So you can change your ratios by changing how many teeth it has. All right, I'm going to let you play around with those a little bit more. By the way, if I wanted to connect this instead, I didn't want it connected to gear number 1. I wanted it connected to gear number 0. Well, then I've got it selected, it's highlighted, and I can come over here to parent gear number and say I wanted that connected to 0. Select. And so now we have it connected. Both of them are connected to that parent gear. Now the problem is they're overlapping. I can't really see that. So I'll probably definitely want to select the gear number 2 right here and change its connection along the along that parent, and now I can kind of see how it is set up there and start it and stop it. All right, anyways, so that's how you add, you can remove, you can change their properties. Let's check out the Gear Generator 2 beta. So I'm going to click that. It takes us to the beta version right here, and this is kind of exciting, some new things on here. What you're looking at here are planetary gears. This is just the default, what you see when you open it up. Along here, we'll see different gear types. So that's one upgrade that they've given us here. We see some of the same things, the start and stop and our speed. We can speed it up as we're going along, just one at a time, plus and minus right there. We can also hit reverse, change its direction. That's kind of cool. The same types of characteristics down here that we saw before. X and Y position, the connection angle, axle angle. We can name it. I don't know why we do that. Anyway, the planetary setup has these. You can play around with those. Number of teeth. We can change any of those. Here's the planetary gears. Of course, the more teeth you have, the larger the gear set will be. So there's planetary gears you can play around with. Their gear chain right here. So this is just like what we'd see on a bicycle with a driven gear and a drive gear. I think this probably would be the drive gear and the driven gear, and we can of course select and then change its number of teeth, change the number of teeth and so forth here. Connection angle like that. Of course there's internal gear right here. You can add some, and then our regular gear type that we took a look at with our external gears right here. Okay. That's all I'm going to do right here. So I thank you, appreciate it.